Jered shows me a lot of books, and the book he showed me was Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank. It was a real good
Yeah.
book. And one of the things that he sort of spells out is how, like, money is obviously a big factor in the country, but also this status, and status isn't necessarily linked to money. So there are these
Right.
there's the professional class, these professionals like lawyers, like doctors, these experts in their field that are inherently supposed to be working for the people. Like doctors obviously aren't supposed to be like, yeah, your leg's fine, but let's cut it off so I can make an extra 50K this month. Like, obviously, they're not trying to do that.
Right.
And lawyers aren't supposed to be, they're supposed to follow the law, and the law is supposed to protect you and all these things. But the problem with that is the Democratic Party has sort of tailored their whole politics towards this sort of professional class, and
Right.
obviously they get paid more because they're supposed to be, uh, their profession is supposed to be to help people. And
That's a big one. That to underscore that point is that,
sure,
like, what Frank does say in the book that I mean, he says a lot, and I think he's very incisive, and anybody should read that book. But on that, like, that he's sort of arguing in some sense against meritocracy for its own sake. And that's sort of what you're describing, which is like the idea of, rather than a kind of more purely democratic system, the idea what we really need to temper it against is meritocracy. Those are words that get thrown around, and people, I think, don't have a sense of how oppositional the notion of meritocracy is versus democracy.
Right.
In other words, if we take it seriously, the idea of like the people who are the best qualified to understand things in their given field should be the ones deciding what we do generally as a society, versus people all have, one person, one vote, everyone sort of having an equal idea. So it's not to say meritocracy has no place, but when you mentioned like the idea of helping people, I know that's very, like, at some level banal, but like the idea that we cede authority to these people's decisions on the basis that they're using their expertise for the public good. And when you have divisions between their interests with the interest of what would be their good and the general public, that's when meritocracy becomes, I don't know, the enemy, right? It serves power instead of serving people. And so, yeah, that's sort of where we're at.
And with the Supreme Court specifically, they are a technocrat meritocracy thing where it's like, hey, we're going to get the best judges to judge who can judge the best.
Right.
Isn't that great? Here's the 9 best people to judge in the country. That's an insane, if you break it down, it's like, that's an insane thing to think.
And it's like liberal fantasy par excellence, right? Because it is like, if you ask people, if you put it to them, like, do we really think these people are apolitical? It's I don't even think people buy it. Like, even the people who are arguing for this, like, almost like Platonic Callipolis perfect city model, where we have these like 9 people beyond politics, if you actually put it, it's like, do you for a moment think that like Neil Gorsuch is an apolitical figure? I think they would be like, well, no, not really. And that's the case. And there have been plenty of, like, I've read plenty of articles about just going through these different opinions and how their ideology is ultimately what sort of decides these opinions, and they sort of like can come up with a legal rationalization otherwise. And that's the hole in the system, I think. I mean, there are other problems, but like the idea was that you would appoint them and they would be free from immediate electoral political pressure, which may be the case. The problem is they still have ideology, right? So they still have beliefs and values that are politically determined, that even if it's not on the basis of pleasing some constituency, they ultimately, that they have a vision for how they think the country ought to be, and then they can explain why legally it needs to be that afterwards.
And that's the point that I'm building to, seems to be like, what if the Supreme Court are technocrats, they're the expert in their fields that know better than everyone else. Right. But what are they experts in? They seem to be expert in the Constitution and the laws,
right?
Or whatever. They don't. And the Constitution and the laws have to do with the past, have to do with tradition, have to do with how things have been, and that's not democratic.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's not.
I mean, obviously, the institution is not democratic, but I'm saying, like, if there was a group of philosophers and their expertise was in, why are we here? How should we be living? What's the best way to achieve good things for everyone, then that would be a really interesting thing to be like, yeah, let's bring Roe v. Wade to these philosophers who don't care about the law as much as they care about like, why are we here? What do we value? Who are we?
Right.
But these people are like, no, we're experts in the laws. And what do we think about those big questions? Like, who are we and what do we value? Oh, well, it's just the same ideology. It's the same ideological pool that everyone's fucking slurping shit out of. And it's like, well, you're not
Yeah.
actually better at, maybe you know the laws better, but like I don't need to know what Roe v. Wade is to have to think out the consequences of having it versus not
Yeah.
having it.
And
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 like
and
that, so so at that point it's like, oh, they're the best judges. Well, their judgment, the core of their judgment comes from the same place as everyone else's. So you're not any better. You just have a cool black robe.